One bit of the text that we've touched on that we haven't looked at very closely yet is what Analio calls the refrain. So at the end of each of the Satipattanas, there's this little set of verses that goes, in this way, in regard to body, feelings, mind, or dhammas, one abides contemplating them internally, externally, internally and externally. And then one abides contemplating the nature of arising, the nature of passing away, the nature of both arising and passing away in each of them. Then mindfulness that there is body or feelings or mind or dhammas is established to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness. And one abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. This is how, in regard to body, feelings, mind, and dhammas, one abides contemplating them in terms of the section that we're in. So the fact that this gets repeated after every Satipatthana gives it a bit of an emphasis. It sounds like they're trying to get at something. I suppose, first of all, it's something that applies to each of the areas that we're taking awareness into. But the second thing, I think that repetition gives it an emphasis. It says, look, there's something significant happening here, and it's significant in relation to every field of experience. So let's have a little go at looking at some of this. So the first one is that we are, in regard to whatever Satipatthana we're in, we're contemplating them internally, externally, and both internally and externally. And I said at the sort of early on in the retreat that the commentarial tradition pretty consistently regards this as awareness of others. So we're not just developing our own awareness of our bodies, awareness of feelings, awareness of mind. We're also attending to that in others. And I have to say, for me, this is a crucial bit of the practice. It's left just kind of implicit in the Satipatthana Sutta, and I guess in the Pali Canon, other teachings like the Brahma Viharas and so on kind of goes into this area more explicitly. But I think if we're sort of seeing this as a bit of an overall framework for practice, this external element, this awareness, not just of ourselves, but of others, becomes a really, I think it's necessary to make it more explicit. And I think if we don't, one of the kind of dangers, you get the myth of it and the historical argument between the people following the Bodhisattva path and the Arahant path, and the criticism, and it's a bit of a straw man criticism historically, I think, but the criticism is that the Arahant path is too self-referential, and that the Bodhisattva path explicitly includes compassion and self and other. I don't think that's historically true, but I think it is pointing to something that can go out of balance in our own practice. I think if we don't, maybe I just speak for myself, if I don't consciously attend to the experience of others, my practice can become just a sort of subtler and subtler refinement within my own kind of self-reference. And I think this awareness of self and other is really intrinsic. It's really kind of fundamental to what we're moving towards in spiritual practice. So this emphasis on awareness of other, and all of these different levels needs the emphasis, I think, that I'm giving it. Kind of mysterious about what it is that's being said. So what does it mean, an awareness of others in terms of the Satipattanas? And just to go again, sort of slightly coming at it obliquely, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about the Rembrandt self-portrait in Kenwood. And I don't know how familiar you are with Rembrandt self-portraits. Don't know if you know the Rembrandt self-portrait in Kenwood House. In Hampstead Heath, in Kenwood House, there is arguably the single best painting from the Western tradition. Opinions may differ on quite that, but it's one of the late Rembrandt self-portraits. And one of the amazing things about Kenwood, at least before the lockdown, is that quite often you've got it to yourself. So you're in a room that's got a Rembrandt on one wall, a Vermeer on the other wall, and you've just got these two masterpieces. You can just sort of rotate your attention and pay attention to them while the odd person comes through. But the thing about it is really Rembrandt's one of the great portraitists. He's one of the great self-portraitists. And this arguably, I think, is the finest of the self-portraits. It's second or third last portrait that he painted. He's in his mid-60s. He's not far from death. And you've got this absolutely fearless, kind attention to his face and his body and his life at the end of 63 years of ups and downs. But what's remarkable about it is, just marks on canvas. And you get this incredible sense of what that person's experience must have felt like. Not only that, but you get a sense of what the quality of their awareness was like. You get both the personality, and it's almost like mysteriously you're getting access to a deeper, more careful attention than I'm usually capable of. So somehow I'd got no idea how this works, but the fact that Rembrandt was able to pay so much attention to his own experience, and he can describe it in a way that opens my experience up to a kind of kinder, more careful attention. Anyway, that's the long way around. You don't need to go to Kenwood or look at the Rembrandt, but just trying to get a sense of there's something in the simple, intuitive attention to another person, and what we can pick up, the sense we get of like Bhante once said that, in the Zen tradition, the teachers would just watch the monks walk across the courtyard, and the next bit of teaching came out of how they walked. But, put attention to somebody else's body, attention to how they look, attention to how they're moving, and the kind of mood that we pick up. Very often we're picking up, kind of remarkable felt sense, not just of our own experience, but of another person's experience. And the Rembrandt's just such a beautiful example of that. So there's something in this, I think, of that, allowing our awareness to go out just to attend to somebody else, just including them in our awareness, and aware of the kind of feel, the sense of somebody else's being that we pick up in that. Luckily, communication lets us check, right? So not only do we have to kind of look, you can come away with, I don't know if you've ever found this, but on retreats, I can build up quite a conversation on a silent retreat about what somebody else thinks of me. And in checking my experience against their experience, it usually turns out they haven't been thinking about me at all. But if they have been thinking about me, it might not have been as it was going on in my head. So every now and again, it's good to check our deeply felt intuitive perceptions, I think. And luckily, communication allows us to do that. But there's something in that kind of training our awareness to include self and other that I think this practice is getting at. There's a lovely little passage in Bante's Living with Kindness. And he's quoting a Scottish philosopher, I think, called McMurray. I think it's McMurray, it might or might not be. But anyway, he's talking about objective emotion. And Bante's arguing that metta is objective emotion. It came as a wee bit of a surprise reading that. I think quite often I think of metta as this rather rarefied, quite idealistic response to others. And Bante's argument is that we misperceive the world. We see it from such a self-referential perspective. And he's saying that reality is self and other. Right, that you start to pay attention to the world round about us. The universe does not revolve around us and our concerns. And he was saying that metta is the relationship to reality that most closely fits the facts and most closely fits the nature of things. So it's a quality of response that includes self and includes other. And from that point of view, metta is a more objective response to the world than our usually intensely self-referential responses of craving, aversion, and so on. So I love that idea that sort of metta is the emotional equivalent of the awareness broadening out to include self and other. So this aspect of it, this bit of training, again, that we're not just deepening our own experience, but we're gradually broadening it out to include self and other. And what's been said here, again, traditionally, is that this is a sequence that we're going through. So first of all, it's internal. We're actually learning how to pay attention to our own experience, what it's like, what it feels like. And on the basis of that, we can start to sort of broaden it out. We can start to a bit more imaginatively get a sense of what another's experience is like. I went Googling a quote from that I half remembered from Carol Rogers. And the quote I was looking for was one that was something like, quoting Rogers, she says, "Deep attention is, I believe, the most precious gift one can give to another person." And like it's a truism, it's such a familiar idea. But when you do the meditation practice, it's such a relief to be able to be in connection to yourself. And it's a bit like we can open that space up for other people as well. Just by being willing to include somebody else as they are in our awareness opens a space up that helps them become more self-aware. Another quote from Rogers, I'm afraid Googled this one quote and then found a whole stack of Rogers quotes that are so good for this little passage. So Rogers also said, the degree to which I can create relationships which facilitate the growth of others as separate persons is the measure of the growth I have achieved in myself. So this idea that you're looking at a sequence and the capacity that we're able to attend to, the capacity that we have to attend to another person is parallel to the capacity we have to start to be aware of, alive to our own experience. And each influences the other, but basically what we're learning to attend to in ourselves is what we have more and more access to when we attend to others. So first of all, we're attending to ourselves. Secondly, there's a bit of a rebalancing where we're aware of self and other. Well, more aware of other, actually. We're just sort of, as Bhante talks about, bending the bamboo the other way. We're starting to attend to the other, to go against their own bias, to be more aware of our own perspectives. But then what you want to get to is aware internally and externally. It's an awareness that's equally open, equally alive. That teaching that you get in Metta Bhavana, that you want to get to a point where your well-being, your friends' well-being, the well-being of others, in a way you can't really differentiate between them. And one of the trainings for that, I think, is just this attending to the whole field of life round about us and learning to be aware of and responsive to that. So we end up with both internal and external attended to. Remember doing a communication exercise with a friend of mine, Attila, once, who a lot of people on this call will know. Kamini Badger might well have been on the retreat where I saw this. But he did this lovely little variation on a communication exercise. And he started off by saying, just sit opposite the other person, start off with your eyes closed, and then be aware of yourself. And then from that awareness of yourself, be aware of the person sitting opposite. And then I thought, a really, really interesting question. It just said, notice where your awareness naturally goes. Does it tend to be more on yourself? Does it tend to be more on the other? And then this question, would it be possible to include both? So just in any exchange that you're having, even in this wee exchange now, so I'm quite aware of trying to keep my head straight, trying to remember what it is I'm trying to say, and just for a moment to broaden my awareness out, to realize that each of you are real and kind of engaging in your own processes and engagement with this text. So just each of us aware of that broader field of experience without losing that living connection with ourselves. But that great question, would it be possible to include both, include ourselves and include the other? Meditation that we'll do in a minute, I want to come back to that, just that awareness of ourselves opening out into awareness of the other. But to touch on the other bits of the refrain first. So one abides contemplating the nature of arising or passing away, of both arising and passing away in ourselves and in others and in each of the satipatthanas. So what we've been touching on this already, the attention we've been giving to impermanence and the arising and the passing. So this is just an encouragement to carry that awareness out into our sustained experience. And again, this is maybe not a corrective that you need, but sometimes if you come at impermanence a bit conceptually, we come at it as an insight teaching, we come at it as a wisdom teaching, it can feel like something a little cool, a little even cold. So another bit of Rogers, if I may. A person is a fluid process, not a fixed static entity. A person is a flowing river of change, not a block of solid material, a continually changing constellation of potentials, not a fixed quality of traits. I realize that if I were stable and steady and static, I would be living death. So just this idea that we're this river of change, a continually changing constellation of potentialities. And it's just starting for that to be more and more of our lived, felt experience of ourselves. So this fixed, static view that we have of ourselves starts to soften as that awareness of impermanence becomes more of a quality of our attention to our experience. Another thing about it, and the way this sort of sets up the ground for what comes next, is that if you realize that our experience is impermanent, we can hang a little bit more lightly to it. So a lot of the time we totally buy in to the mental state that we're having. If we're having a good mental state, life is wonderful. If we're having a bad mental state, life is terrible. Again, please excuse me if I'm generalizing inappropriately from my own experience, but we tend to get totally shaped by the experience that's present. And what's being said here is that you're taking a bit of a step back into this sustained quality of awareness that's able to be present to the arising and the passing. And the awareness becomes more and more of the shaping character of our experience. And it's not that you disconnect from what's going on, but it doesn't become the absolute determining shape of our experience or our consciousness. Whatever it is, you can be completely alive to it, give it the attention that it's asking for, but you're also aware of it rising and you're aware of it passing. It doesn't need to become the absolute defining current in our experience. And that brings us on to the next couple of points. Your mindfulness that there's a body or feelings or mind or dhammas, established to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness. Picking up on a couple of the commentaries, one of the points that gets made about this is that what you're looking for more and more, what as it says, this bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness. We're going from a position of not being very aware of our experience to trying to set up a momentum where we're more and more just available to experience. That quality of receptive awareness is there. So you're sort of looking for that quality. And this idea of bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness, I don't totally like the language of bare knowledge, I must say, of bare awareness, of bare experience. Seems just a wee bit too austere for my taste. Like what it's getting at is an awareness without us building prapancha around it, just being able to stay with a simple experience. But for me, I think the kind of feel of that experience matters. You know, the fact that there's a quality, a kindness, of empathy is intrinsic to it's just awareness looked at from another angle. But you're looking for more and more that to be our sustained quality of awareness. But again, one of the points that Analayo makes is that this little exhortation comes at the end of a very detailed practice instruction. You've just been through a whole set of instructions about how to be aware of the body, how to be aware of the feelings, how to be aware of the mind. So again, it's this suggestion that mindfulness might be something that, in a way, it's a natural, spontaneous quality of mind, but it's supported by conditions. So to some extent, you can't will that kind of continuous, natural quality of aware connection. But what we can do, again, is set up the conditions in each of the satipatthanas that opens up the space for it and that allows it to become more and more of a sustained experience. And the last one that Madra flagged early on in the retreat, that we abide independent and not clinging to anything in the world. And this might be an obvious point, but it's interesting that we're talking about independence after talking about being aware internally and externally. Well, for a whole section about relationship, basically, and that softening of the boundary between self and other. And this one about independence. So just interesting to think what that's getting at. And I think what I'd like to suggest is that we've had a flavour of this all the way through the practice, that you've got this sort of twofold process going on. First of all, of connecting to the experience, but then on whatever level we're on, a letting go and a letting be. So we're aware of pleasurable or painful experience, but there's a consistent quality of attention and kindness in relationship to that, that more and more becomes our consistent central quality of our minds. We start off, our attention mainly is on external experience. So again, sort of good experience, we feel good, painful experience, we feel bad. And what you're doing more and more in practice is you're taking not so much attention away from the externals, but you're attending more and more to how we respond. So instead of the habit of responding from craving or responding from aversion, we're responding from openness and availability and responding from love. And to the extent that we manage to do that, our awareness becomes less and less shaped by the accidents of external experience. So we've just opened up to something where we're aware of external and internal. We're alive to the impermanence of it. We're, what was the other? We've got this sustained quality of openness. And in that openness, we start to be able to consistently sit in that openness, sit in that availability, less and less shaped by what we come into contact with. And again, you've got this paradox of why I think all this language of dispassion and relinquishment and independence doesn't totally work. Paradoxically, we're more alive to the breath. We're more alive to the body. We're more alive to how we feel. We're more alive to the nature of the awareness, and we're less shaped by it. There's a kind of consistency in the awareness that's less and less, or to use the language, less and less conditioned, less and less shaped by the accidents of our experience, more and more able to be consistently available. And to that extent, I'd like to suggest we abide independent and not clinging to anything. So back to this little quote that seems to have been coming to my mind all day today from the Pura Beda Sutta, I think, of the Buddha not clinging to anything as his or rejecting anything as not his. So just a capacity to have the awareness include the whole field of our experience, and for that to be a consistent quality of attention and kindness. Analio makes a nice little point. Well, first of all, Bhante talks about the Satipatthanas as a development of a continuity of mindful positivity across the whole field of human consciousness or human experience. So you're starting to feel, what's your body like? How do you feel? What's your mind doing? And what are we attending to? What's the relationship to the experience around us? And then Analio says that this external and internal starts to extend the awareness in space. So it's not just self-referential, you're opening up to inside and to outside. Reflection on the arising and the passing opens up the awareness in time. You start to be aware of the unfolding process, and the attention to the mindfulness, the independence, and the non-clinging starts to take the awareness more deeply into the nature of consciousness. So you've got this process that we're setting up where we're aware of the whole spectrum of our own experience. It opens up in space, it opens up in time, it deepens into the nature of our own awareness, and you end up with something that at the core of it is this abiding in non-clinging, not clinging to anything, awareness that's available to everything. And last little bit of Rogers, right? We're not going to go straight there to an experience. Rogers says, life is not a state of being, it's a process. It's a direction, not a destination. So you get a feel for where our awareness can start to move, but it's a direction, not a destination. And although it's pointing to something profound, our point of access to that process is as close as how we feel our own breath and starting to take awareness into experience that available and that accessible. And that's a stepping into that stream of experience that the Satipatthana Sutta is pointing us to. So there you go, that sounds like worth a go, doesn't it? Let's do a wee bit of meditation, if we can. And again, just this sort of simple process, it's profound and it's totally accessible. So I just want to come back to an exercise that we did earlier in the retreat of starting off with our own experience and then just broadening out to experience of others. And again, excuse me for doing a wee bit of a mashup. Like to me, Anapanasati and bodhicitta practice are just two kind of different emphases of the same quality of attention. It's the internal and the external aspects of taking awareness into experience. But for those of you who don't know the bodhicitta practice, what we'll do is just become aware of our own quality of awareness, looking for that kind of stability and that sort of more consistent capacity to respond with awareness and kindness, to become aware of our own pleasurable feelings, as the Anapanasati Sutta has been giving us access to, but then just a little bit more attention to the extent that we're able to do it without it disturbing the stability of the awareness. Just include the unpleasant experience. So what's going on right now that's a bit uncomfortable? And it may even be that in our lives right now, there are things that are difficult, things that are painful. So to the extent that we're able to do it, just staying in touch with that stable awareness and opening up to include the painful without pushing it away, just letting our response to our own unpleasant experience to be one of empathy and one of kindness. And then just do it for a friend. Bring to mind what we enjoy, what we appreciate, in a way the kind of qualities in the friend that might even be the kind of skillful qualities, but just enjoying what we feel mudita towards. And then again, to the extent that we're able to do it without it disturbing the awareness, just including our friends' painful experience. And one of the metaphors from bodhicitta practice, if you want to use it, is a sense of our own hearts being open. We breathe in the attention to our friends' painful experience as shadow. It touches our own open hearts and it's transformed into moonlight. and we breathe it out as moonlight. And imagine the moonlight touching our friend, their suffering being relieved. Now, the metaphor might or might not be helpful. I don't want to go too far off Satipatthana practice, but really it's just a metaphor for being a bit more accessible to experience that we habitually resist, and looking for a quality of response to that that's got a softness, an openness, a kindness about it. So if the metaphor's helpful, feel free to use it. If it's not helpful, we can just do it a little more directly. But, and again, just making an intelligent choice about what you want to engage with, that you feel your mindfulness has the capacity for. Is that kind of clear? Any sort of got a sense what we'll be doing for the next 30 minutes or so? I'll talk us through it. That nice Jack Cornfield gag of after the ecstasy, the laundry, just coming back to us sitting on the cushion right here, right now. Just resting for a little bit. That's quite a lot of information to take in. So just letting yourself rest back into your own experience. Connecting to the breath. Breath connecting us to the body. Connecting us to how we feel. Tending to our experience internally. Always the same starting point. Starting to become curious, starting to be connected to the experience of breathing. What would help you to connect to how this breath feels? Just letting our minds gradually find that point of connection. Our minds are wandering. No frustration, no irritation about that at all. Just recognizing it, reminding ourselves of our intention, connecting back to experience now. Sense of knowing the breath with the whole body. Sensitive to the whole body, I breathe in, I breathe out. Calming the whole body. I breathe in, I breathe out. sensitive to piti. I breathe in, I breathe out. And then the shift to sukha. Looking first of all for this sense of deep, or at least deeper connection to our own experience. Pleasure of our mind being a bit more awake. Pleasure of being more connected to our own living, unfolding experience. Breath, body. Looking for that sense of contentment, sense of joy even. It comes from being able to be available to our experience as it is. And that more clear, stable, contented awareness. Just noticing any pleasurable experience without trying to hold it, without any sense of clinging to it. Alive to its moment to moment, changing, unfolding. Now deepening awareness of that, having its own pleasure. And looking for that same quality of connection, same quality of empathy, same quality of kindness even. Just noticing anything in our experience that's unpleasant. something as simple as discomfort in the body. Just noticing, is it possible to be as curious and alive to that as we are to the pleasant experience, as we are to the breath? Instead of the habit of resisting or pushing away, it's responding with a quality of interest and kindness. If we need to move, if we need to adjust, of course that's fine. Just letting ourselves respond without any aversion. And whenever we need to, just coming back to the quality of the awareness, connecting back to the breath, connecting back to that sense of contentment, a sense of joy. That feels like it has a bit of stability. It's broadening the awareness out. The other aspects of our experience that are unpleasant, even things going on in our life that are painful. Bringing them to mind to the extent that we're able to do it while still keeping that open, kind awareness. Feelings just want to be felt. Staying grounded in our awareness of the breath, awareness of our body. From that sense of connection, that sense of awareness, it's bringing a friend to mind. the same interest, the same curiosity, same attention, to a recollection of our friend. In particular, just bringing to mind, first of all, what we appreciate about them. That sense of trying to know that, trying to feel it with our whole body. Making our recollection as vivid as we can. Friend looked like, they sound like, maybe specific things they were doing or saying that we appreciate. Letting our kind awareness just naturally taking on a flavour of mudita as we bring that to mind. Just looking for that sense of a natural pleasure, natural rejoicing in those qualities. Is it possible to include ourselves and our friend in that awareness? Alive to the qualities of our friend, alive to the qualities of our own response. Just taking attention where it needs to go. Staying connected to that quality of awareness and openness. To the extent that we feel able, to the extent that we can do it and still stay connected to ourselves. Opening up our awareness to include our friend's painful experience. Noticing any sense of resisting, any sense of pushing away. Whenever you need to, just coming back to your own sense of connection to yourself. Central in our own awareness. That intention to respond with kindness. It's helpful, we can imagine breathing in our friend's painful experience as shadow. To come into our own open, kind, grounded awareness. Breathe it out as moonlight. Just being aware, can we include ourselves and our friend in that field of awareness? Where does our awareness need to go to balance it? We need to come back to our own sense of connection and openness. To come back to grounding in ourselves, just allowing ourselves to do that. Moving out from there to include our friend's experience too. And finally, just broadening our awareness out to include everyone on the call. That simple sense of each of us breathing together. That sense of empathy as I feel pleasure, as I feel pain. So each of us do. Hold support that responsive awareness of the others that we're attending to. Coming back to the breath, coming back to that simple connection with ourselves. What do we need right now? So what we need right now might be tea. Feeling a lot of appreciation for how still everyone on my screen was sitting. Some of the pictures, it has to be said, are actually still pictures, but even the people who were moving. So let's have a break for 10 minutes and come back and maybe have a little bit of discussion about that in some small groups about our experience. It's a little heads up to Naravira that in 10 minutes time, maybe groups of 3. And meantime, let's have a little break. And we'll come back into the big group first of all, and we'll just give a couple of guiding questions. But 10 minutes.